Hello, friends. Welcome to Ignite Your Wow. I'm Kellen Ann, and I am so happy that you are here today. If you're watching today live, please let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're from. If you have questions for my guests, please put them there. If you're watching this on the replay, put in hashtag replay so that I can thank you for watching my show. Today's show is sponsored by Blue Sky Video Productions. Bruce Himmelblau is my producer and the man that makes me look totally organized. Without him, we wouldn't be here. So let's just say that. He's a YouTube strategist, so he helps you get your numbers up on YouTube with followers and subscribers. And he's a live stream producer, which is what he's doing for me today. And he is so valuable to me. The other sponsor I have is Cards That Wow, and those are handmade branded cards that when your client receives one, they actually look at it and say, wow, and they remember you longer than if you'd sent them a regular card. So, Bruce, do we have a tip for today?
Sure. Tip for today is actually the tip every week really is hit that go live button. I've been on a number of different programs that are talking about how much reservation people have about going live. I was on Clubhouse this morning about one person who says, yeah, they tried doing video in the past and they got bogged down with doing it over and over and over and over again to the extent that they got super conscious about it. A great line from an old Dick Van Dyke show where these two kids are in a TV commercial and the neighbor, Millie, says, well, the kids aren't professionals. And then Rob responds, no, professionals get better. So
I actually remember that episode. So
the key there is get it done, do the first two takes, because after that, you're going to get bogged down with overthinking your content. And
you know what?
People will respond to you being realistic and authentic.
I got the most views on a show where my background fell on top of me and I flipped over backwards on my chair. So yeah, I just do one take, Kellen, no matter what. So thanks, Bruce.
Thanks.
Hello. Okay. Today, my guest is, I've been so excited for weeks about this since I've booked this guest. At 21, he worked at the hippest place on the planet. In 2005, he and his friend wrote a code for an RSS feed, and now his creations are still running strong. Let me bring in Mark Strigl. Do you like my music?
Yeah, no, that was fancy. Good music, nice graphic, high class. Love it. Great stuff.
Thank you so much for being here. You're kind of like a hero of mine.
Oh, really? Well,
I'm dating myself. So I didn't tell everybody what the hippest place in the world to work was. So do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. And am I pronouncing your name right? Kellen?
Yeah.
Kellen Ann.
Yep.
Kellen Ann. Got it.
I used to be Kellen Ann Hardy Fisher. And everybody said that were too many names because I had it so my high school friends could find me. But
oh, okay,
I just put everything off and went with Kellen Ann.
Got it. Cool. Well, Kellen Ann, thank you for having me here. And yeah, so I was fortunate enough as a young man to know somebody who knew somebody who worked at MTV, and after probably like a year of hounding that connection, I was finally granted an interview there in New York City, in the middle of Times Square. And I was given an entry-level position in the videotape library. And I'm dating myself with that because I don't even think my kids know what videotapes are. But so it was a big library, and it had at that time, MTV had just turned 10, which I couldn't believe because it just seems so old, 10 years old. Yeah. But I was in the videotape library with 10 years worth of MTV videotapes, which also included VH1 at that time, and Nickelodeon were the networks that made up MTV Networks. So and that kind of took me into the TV business. I originally was attracted to working there because I loved music and I loved the station MTV. But once I was there, I also found a love for producing and editing and writing video content, aka television, is what we called it back in those days. And yeah, and I kind of ran with it and went from there and was able to launch a fairly successful career in television.
That's awesome. So what are some of your favorite projects?
Oh, well, as far as my TV work goes, I mean, there's been a number of them. I can remember working on some of the award shows that VH1 used to do. I worked on, I think it was the second fashion award show back in the 90s, and that was very exciting. Got to interview all sorts of guests, and I was working with RuPaul, who was still very new and young to the media world, and basically I was his producer, and I would just stand there and be like, okay, we have Elton John coming up. Here's what Elton's up to. And I'd whisper in his or her ear and give him the lowdown on what Elton John was up to. And then he'd do 3 minutes with Elton. And then, the next guest would come up and it would just go on and on like that. And that was an exciting night. I also worked on a David Bowie documentary called David Bowie Legends. That was definitely a highlight. I got to go on and do my own TV show at one point based on my podcast, which was called Talking Metal on Fuse. That was not on VH1. It was on another network called Fuse, but that was definitely a highlight. I worked on some really cool campaigns for the Sci-Fi Channel. I would say working on Battlestar Galactica was a highlight. I would say getting to fly to Los Angeles and cover a number of movies that Sci-Fi were covering, and doing interviews with people like Jessica Alba and Bryce Dallas Howard and some fairly big name stars was always exciting. So there's been a lot of highlights. Yeah.
That's great. You don't seem like the kind of person that's starstruck. You're more like so into your creative and what you're doing, the process. Have you ever been starstruck?
Yeah, definitely. I get nervous. I just recently interviewed Paul Stanley from Kiss, which is actually going to be going up on my YouTube channel momentarily in the next couple days.
I mean, other than talking to me.
Yeah, right. And with Paul, because I've been a fan of his, like a obsessive major fan since I was 8 years old, I felt myself perspiring, sweating, getting nervous, and not being in the moment a little bit. So yeah, I definitely get starstruck. But with him, he really put me at ease, and I think that's a big part of it. Does the person put you at ease, or do they look at you like, oh, this person's fumbling their lines and not doing a good job at the interview? Because I've had that for sure. I've had that for sure, where I feel like the person I'm interviewing isn't approving of the interview that I'm doing, and that's fortunately doesn't happen very often. But when it does, it's definitely an awkward situation. But yeah, I definitely do get starstruck for sure.
It's a weekly occurrence for me.
Okay, cool.
Although you've been doing it a little bit longer than I have. So what is something that you found out about someone that you were completely surprised about?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm trying to think. Oh boy, I don't know. I'm gonna have to give that one some thought that I'm
Okay.
completely surprised about.
Like just a fact you're like, oh, I never thought that about you.
Uh, hmm. That I learned through interviewing them.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to give that one some thought. I don't have a
Okay.
good answer for you on that one. Sorry.
We'll come back to that one. So, so then you created an RSS feed with your friend. Wait, I don't remember what his name was.
Yeah, my friend.
Astronomy.
Yeah, John
That was your
Astronomy
main friend.
Ostrowski. Yeah,
Yeah.
he and I back when we first heard Steve Jobs talking about the iPod was now going to be able to receive subscription based RSS MP3s that he was I think he said we're going to call these shows podcasts because they went right to your
Mhm.
iPod. Of course, you had to plug it in your computer to download
Right.
them and get them on your iPod. But we were fascinated by that because we both had done some on-air work for VH1 and had approached radio stations and Sirius XM and didn't get much luck with getting a show on that. But
Mhm.
when we heard about podcasts, we thought, well, this is our opportunity to do a show on our own and potentially reach thousands and thousands of people. So we were very early on in the podcasting game and got our podcast on iTunes. Now it's Apple Podcasts, but in those days when we got the podcast on iTunes, we were one of like literally hundreds of podcasts that were available in 2005 through iTunes. And recently I just heard that Apple has over 1 million titles, Apple Podcasts. So, which I just think it's so hard now for somebody starting off to break through. I mean, you can do it, but I really think we were fortunate to be so early on. And even though our production maybe wasn't the greatest and we were very green in our interviewing skills, we were able to develop a listener fan base that grew rapidly because we were the only podcast on iTunes that was doing interviews with like hard rock and heavy metal artists. So I do believe to this day that helped us tremendously because we've lost listeners through the years. I mean, but we still have 2,000 to 3,000 downloads per episode, which is for a podcast is really good. So yeah.
Did you have trouble convincing the people you were interviewing, because podcast was probably new to them, and did you have trouble convincing them to do the show, the interview with you, or were they just, "Yeah, I'll just do it"?
It was there was always some having to convince people, but honestly, a lot of these people that we started interviewing, some of our early interviews were bands like Striper, which is a Christian heavy metal band, and that were big in the in the 80s, and a crazy guitar player named Yngwie Malmsteen, and these were some of our earliest interviews. And these guys at that time, they had no other outlets. Sirius XM wasn't playing
Right.
them and definitely wasn't interviewing them. VH1 and MTV, they weren't covering these guys, so I feel like they were in need of outlets to cover their music, and they were once mainstream, but now they were very much underground. So I think because we were so early on and because these guys were maybe not at the level of stardom that they once were, we were able to get interviews with them, probably fairly easy. And I think nowadays the internet is exposed in a good way all different genres of not only music but everything,
Mhm.
and you can find groups of like-minded people, whether it's music or politics or sports or whatever. You can find it on the internet and find mutual like-minded people who enjoy, in this example, that style of music. But back in those times, it wasn't there yet. The internet was
Mhm.
still developing and growing. So yeah, we were very lucky with our guests back in the early days, and and to this day, I mean, right there on the screen, Rudy Sarzo. I mean, he's played bass with Ozzy Osbourne and Whitesnake and Quiet Riot, and it just gave me an interview, but he's been on 3 or 4 times in the 15 years I've been doing this. So it's been a great ride for sure with the podcasting.
So do you feel that there was somebody that you really thought had talent and you wanted to get them out there, that you were kind of a stepping stone to get them to be noticed and become recognized? Or were they all mostly recognized? I didn't get a chance to look at every one of them yet.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we've had younger bands on that I thought were great and wanted to let people know about the bands. I mean, I can, off the top of my head, there was a great band, they're still around actually, called Warbringer. And when we interviewed them, they were like 19-year-old kids, they're probably about 30 now, but they were in desperate need of what I thought was, promotion for making really great music. So I mean, yeah, that's a band that slips to my mind. But there's also, like I said before, all these older bands that just don't have an outlet to have their music heard or their voices heard. And we used to play music on the podcast, and we had to stop because we got thrown off of Spotify, and we didn't want to get thrown off of Apple Podcasts. And there's been a big movement to stop any podcast from playing music, which is a whole big discussion that we could get into but won't. But for a long time we would actually interview the artist and play their music, but now for legal reasons we had to stop that in order to get back onto Spotify and some other platforms. So
I'm glad you're back.
yeah
It stinks though, because that's kind of what you do, and you're showcasing
and especially
artists.
for these artists, there's no other outlet except, I mean, there's YouTube, sure, but there's no other true outlet, I feel, than podcasts that play some of these older artists. So yeah, so it's a shame, but that's the way the industry has gone, and I get it. There's sound recording rights and stuff like that, and but it's very hard for an independent podcaster to secure licensing fees and all that type of stuff. So yeah,
I'm a bit of a rock legend myself. I don't know if you
knew that. No, I didn't know that.
So no, my claim to fame is I can play the intro to Bruce Springsteen's Jungleland on my violin.
Oh,
so if you ever want to interview me, just let me know.
Right.
Right on. I have a fan base of like 3.
Okay.
Oh, wait, my aunt died. Okay, 2.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. So I look at all the stuff online about you, and it's like, to me, you're like a Renaissance man. You're
thanks.
Always a step ahead of everything. You did MTV before. I don't know. I think it was still growing at that time. And, to take a job in that platform where it's so new, and well, not so new, but it's newer, as a career, you were kind of taking a chance that, yeah, I think this is going to work. And so you have this mind where I feel like you're ahead of everything. So you have your podcast now.
Right.
What is next for you?
Well, the podcast is still very much a side hustle for me. I mean, you hear that phrase a lot, but I still do TV production work. I have a new production gig in television starting up on Monday. So there's always new stuff happening, and that's the nature of being freelance in video production and television production. And it's the podcast has always kind of been the consistent hobby part-time job, if you will. But as far as what's next, I again, it's always there's I don't really want to say what the next company I'm doing a job for that starts on Monday, just because I don't want to get in trouble for it. But
Yeah, no, you're fine.
yeah, but with the podcast, it's I guess always the hope that we can do more video content, kind of like this. So we've started doing live streams. We have another one on March 18th next week, a live stream, and I think maybe that's what we're looking at next, to develop that maybe on a more regular basis. So we're doing it maybe a weekly video live stream, but definitely would like to do more video content with Talking Metal. So
Yeah,
that's possibly what's coming next as far as
will,
Talking Metal.
will they be able to play their music on this platform, or would you run into this?
No, I mean, not on YouTube. It's just even if the band told me, yeah, play our music, YouTube will detect that somebody owns the copyright and the sound recording rights and the songwriting rights, and they will take it down. So playing music, you used to kind of be able to get away with it, and we'd have record companies that say, yeah, please play our, independent record companies, even some majors that would be like, yeah, play this song on your podcast. It's fine with us. But now the way that music is detected on these platforms, it's a really bad idea, in my personal opinion, to try to play music on your podcast unless you're a major corporation like an NBC Universal or something, and you have a team of lawyers and a team of people who can actually, and money for that can actually clear the music and let the platforms know, hey, this music's cleared, you're not going to take down the video once it's up there. But it's a very difficult thing, I believe, for independent podcasters and streamers to do, and I personally think you should avoid it.
So do the songwriters own the rights, or is it the record company? How does that work? Because if it's their
it all depends. I mean, certain artists will sign away all the rights to everything to get a record deal, and the labels and the publishing companies are owned by people who aren't the songwriters or aren't the performers. So
okay,
yeah, I think it varies from artist to artist.
Okay, well, I've beaten that question into the ground. I'll move on. Your family. Let's talk about life outside of work.
Right. Yeah, I'm living in Maplewood, New Jersey, which is a really kind of cool, hip town in New Jersey that we love. And my wife and I are both music lovers. We go to a lot of concerts, obviously not this past year, but in general, that's our date night, is going to concerts. And we've probably literally together, we were just talking about this yesterday, hundreds of concerts together. And we have two children who are 10 and 12 years old, and they are not into rock and roll whatsoever.
Are they into that horrible rap stuff?
A little bit. I mean, they like music. Especially my younger son, he's got a great singing voice, but they're more into like gaming and stuff like that, which is, to me, in a lot of ways, the new rock and roll, because it's like, I'm the dad, and the same way my dad used to hate Iron Maiden and AC/DC, I like hate Fortnite and all this other stuff that my kids are obsessed with. So it in a lot of ways, to me, gaming is the new rock and roll, because the parents hate it, and they don't understand it. And that's exactly how it was when I was a kid with, the bands I loved.
Well, I'll tell you what, I wish my daughter liked gaming instead of the music that she's listening to, because it gives me a headache from all the swearing. And I'm like, I've just turned into my dad.
Right.
Because he used to hate listening. I used to play Queen like so loud, and my dad would come running up the stairs. Turn that goddamn music down.
How old's your daughter?
My daughter's she's 17. She's getting ready to head to college in a few months. So so I won't have to listen to it.
Right.
Her roommate can deal with it at that point.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So I had another question. I do this every show. If you watch any of them, I go, forgot what I was gonna say.
Oh yeah, it happens. That's why most of my stuff isn't live, and I go through it and I pull out every breath and every little stutter I do. So I always think I'm a lot better when I'm not live because it's cleaned up so much. It's amazing. Yeah.
I think Bruce is gonna do a compilation of me doing this.
Yeah. Okay.
Like just one show of me doing it, because we could
Right.
probably fill up an hour pretty easily. So I have so my show is called Ignite Your Wow. And what I do is I bring people like you on to talk to my audience because you have made me wow. You're a wow person. And I ask
Thanks.
I ask all of my interviewees, how do you define wow?
Oh, how do I define wow? I think I would define wow as being moved, whether it's an energy or an emotional movement by content that people are providing. And I guess to me, the wow is just how easy it is for everyone now to do content because you no longer have to have a massive television budget or movie budget
Mhm.
to do things. I do think to this day that can help, but you look at like what's going on with like the TikTok videos and the YouTube videos, and there is the ability to reach people with whatever you do. And to me, I mean, that's what wows me when I see whether it's a dog video or something, I hear a cool song or just see something that inspires me. I mean, that's what I guess wows me. I don't know if that makes sense,
No,
but yeah.
it's different for everybody. There's no right or wrong answer. Unless I don't like what you said, then I say it
Right.
was wrong, but I liked what you said. So what do you have any advice for people that are wanting to, maybe follow in your footsteps, into the production and the video and, your love of music? Do you have any, because it's so different now than when you just pestered someone
Right.
until they broke down and let you go. I don't think you could do that anymore. There's so much competition these days.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm 51 years old, so I've been doing it a long time. And I do feel that your networking and connections are vitally important. And I think that's something you have to think about. I think the drive that you have too is very important. I think that you can have a mediocre product, unfortunately, but if you have the drive and the determination, you have a better chance at succeeding than somebody who has the most amazing product ever. And it's like I used to have a roommate and he had all these great ideas, but he never did anything. He sat there
Mhm.
on the couch drinking beer, watching TV and watching football, and it was like he really had great ideas, but he just never got anything done. And I think, again, I think you can have the greatest ideas in the world and not get anywhere. I think it's what you need to have is that drive, and connections to me are so important. And it's something I feel like I lost track of a little bit, and I'm trying to get back on target. I moved out of New York City. I had a family, and it's harder to keep up those connections. And I now realize that that's such an important part of getting to places in life. It's knowing people. And I mean, you think of like politicians, how many hands they shake and how many people they talk to. And that to me is so is so important. I think you just talking to as many people as possible. And, you know, I do a Patreon page now, and I've for a long time just did the page and just expected people to show up and give me $2 a month for basically all the content that I was giving away for free. But now on Patreon, I've really been trying to interact with the people who are essentially my paying customers and fans, people who are, you know, the true fans, because they're actually financially supporting what I do. And I think just the social interactions with them on the social media platform of Patreon, now that I'm interacting with them, not only am I enjoying the interaction with them, but I feel like it's even made them more devoted to what I'm doing. And their connections. I mean, that's you know, I've joined some Patreon pages and never even got a personal message from the person, you know, hey, thanks for joining me here. You know, where are you from? What do you do? And it's just the little things like that, just taking the time to connect with somebody is going to make them feel better, but it's also going to help you in the long run, whether it's, you know, a supporter that stays with you longer on Patreon, or somebody who recommends you for a job down the road. So I think the more social you can be, not just on social media, because I think there's really something to be said with picking up the phone and calling people, and once COVID's over, going out and talking with people in person. I think all that stuff's vitally important. But yeah, connections. I don't even remember what your question was at this point, but I just think connections are vitally important, you know, and that's something that I would really drive, focus, and connections. Those are the things that I think are the most important. Sadly, even more important than ideas and content.
That's sad.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean,
Yeah,
I always
you're right.
point to like Puff Daddy, who was pretty mediocre hip hop rapper, but that guy, no one worked harder than that guy. And, you know, I mean, sure, did he have some luck? Yeah, but he worked his tail off, and he's a guy whose ideas probably really, they weren't as good. I'm sure there was lots of other 90s hip hop artists that were way more talented and way more edgy, you know, but he worked his tail off, and, you know, who knows what he's up to now, but for a while he was really on top of the world. And I always say, well, he's really not that talented. And then later I realized, yeah, but he had this drive that probably most people didn't have, you know? So
A part of it, I think, is he pushed his brand too.
yeah,
He created a brand, and I know that's such an overused word, but that if you have a brand that you're consistent with, I think, you know, even in business, I think that applies. You can have this great brand and have a mediocre product,
yeah.
and the people that either don't wanna create it, they're lazy, they don't know how, they could have these amazing ideas, but never get it to anybody because, you know, they didn't take that extra step. So I
And I think
totally
that's a good point. Yeah, totally what you're saying there, because I think staying on brand is also something, you know,
Mhm.
like I have the tendency to sometimes, well, I do this podcast about heavy metal, but maybe I should do another podcast about Star Wars and do another podcast about this and that. And suddenly it's like it's stretched too thin. Whereas if you just kept your focus on one thing, you know, you gotta, I always say you gotta pick your poison. You can't
Right.
do it all, you know, you can't do it all. And a lot of times that's something I've struggled with, because I've had so many ideas, and you really, you know, have to keep only a few things in your arsenal, you know,
Mhm.
and focus real hard on them.
Well, it's like you're, what's that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Nothing. Yeah,
You
yeah,
need to be
yeah,
the master of one, and I mean, your podcast is a living proof of that.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I
thank you.
mean, that's it right there.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. So, is there a question that you wish people would ask you? Because I know everybody always talks to you about, you know, the stars you work with, you know, your video, your MTV. What's a question that you wish people would ask?
Um, a question that I wish people would ask. I I don't know. I don't really get in, believe it or not, I don't get interviewed that much. So I really, I guess wish that's a tough one.
Okay, I've stumped you twice.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, if you think of it, send it to me and I'll let my audience know.
Okay. Absolutely.
Well, do you have any final words? We're a little over our half-hour point.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm real respectful of your time, and I just wanted to. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Do you want to tell everybody how to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to find me is at my website, which is markstrigl.net. You have it up there on the screen. Thank you. And that has links to everything I do. So there is the Talking Metal podcast, and you can hear the most recent episode right there by using the player. There's the Talking Rock podcast, same thing. Most recent episode is posted there. There's links to my Twitter feed, my Patreon, and my other podcast. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but you can find it all there. So that would be it.
Love that. I hate when you have to go to 15 different places to find something.
Yeah.
You're a one-stop shop.
Right. Yep. That's the
Well,
place.
thank you again for being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. And if you're on the replay, please let me know. Thank you, Blue Sky Video Productions and Cards That Wow for sponsorships. I will see you guys next week.
Thank you, Kellen.
Thank you.